The first laugh didn't come from the gallery. It came from the bench. Ridgway County Courthouse, Ridgway, Westmont, Monday morning. The kind of gray day that made the fluorescent lights feel even harsher than usual. The courtroom was full, not because the case was famous yet, but because people in town loved a good downfall story. A teenager accused of stealing from a powerful executive? That was entertainment. At the defense table sat Daniel Brooks, 19 years old, shoulders tight, hands clasped so hard his knuckles looked pale. His public defender kept whispering in his ear, but Daniel stared straight ahead like he was afraid his eyes would give him away. Across from him, the prosecutor, Assistant District Attorney Marcus Reed, had his file stacked into neat, confident piles. He looked like someone who'd already practiced his closing argument in the mirror. And in the front row, polished shoes crossed at the ankle, Victor Stanton watched like a man attending a meeting he owned. He was 52, influential, and calm in a way that suggested he was used to people moving around him like furniture. The bailiff called, "All rise," and Judge Raymond Hale entered with a measured stride, robe hanging perfectly, expression already bored. 45, strict, proud. His reputation was simple. He didn't tolerate nonsense, and he didn't like surprises. The clerk read the case number. The judge nodded. The prosecutor began. "Your Honor," Marcus Reed said, voice clear, "the state will show that on the night of October 14th, the defendant accessed Stanton Biotech's internal accounting system, initiated unauthorized wire transfers totaling $212,000, and attempted to conceal his actions through falsified entries. We will present records, access logs, and the audit ledger documenting the theft." $212,000 hung in the air like a heavy coat someone had thrown over Daniel's shoulders. Daniel swallowed. The public defender, Diane Marshall, stood and spoke about reasonable doubt, about a kid who stocked supply closets and emptied trash, about a system he barely understood. But her voice sounded small next to the state's certainty. Then Diane said, "The defense calls Evelyn Carter." There was a pause. People shifted, curious. Who was Evelyn Carter? Another character in the town's favorite new scandal? A door opened at the side. An older woman walked in slowly, not frail, but careful, like someone who had learned to measure her steps. 67, gray hair pulled back, a plain cardigan over a simple blouse, no expensive jewelry, no dramatic entrance. She carried a worn leather tote bag, and a folder hugged close to her chest. Somebody in the back whispered, "That's who they've got." Another voice murmured, "That's sad." Evelyn approached the witness stand, and the bailiff guided her to the chair. The clerk raised a Bible for the oath. "Do you swear the testimony you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do," Evelyn said, calm as still water. Judge Hale leaned back and looked at her over his glasses. His tone was polite, but the edge was there. "Miss Carter," he said, "what is your relationship to the defendant?" Evelyn blinked once. None by blood. A few chuckles. Judge Hale's mouth twitched. "And your occupation?" "Retired," she said. More chuckles, louder now. Retired was a word people used when they didn't want to admit they didn't matter anymore. Judge Hale tilted his head. Retired from what exactly? Evelyn's hands rested on the edge of the witness box. From public service. The prosecutor didn't hide his smile. Victor Stanton didn't hide his either. Judge Hale glanced at Diane Marshall like she'd brought the wrong person to the wrong party. "Counsel," Judge Hale said, "I want to be clear. This is a court of law, not a community theater. If this witness can't offer relevant testimony, I will not waste the court's time." Diane opened her mouth, but before she could speak, Judge Hale looked at Evelyn again. "Miss Carter," he said, "do you understand the seriousness of what we're doing here? A young man is charged with felony theft and fraud. You were called as a witness. So tell me, why are you here?" Evelyn didn't flinch. "I'm here," she said, "because everyone in this room is acting like the audit ledger is truth." The prosecutor's smile faded slightly. Evelyn continued, "And because I know what happens when a court mistakes paperwork for proof." Judge Hale let out a short laugh, almost a scoff, like he couldn't help himself. Audit ledger, he repeated. Miss Carter, are you an accountant? No. Are you an auditor? Not by job title. Are you a forensic analyst? Evelyn lifted her eyes. Not in the way you mean. Judge Hale's laugh turned into something the room could hear clearly now, and it carried permission. The gallery followed with laughter, like they'd been waiting for the signal. Even the prosecutor chuckled, shaking his head like it was all unfortunate. Daniel stared at the table, face burning. Judge Hale raised a hand to quiet the room, but his expression stayed amused. Miss Carter, he said, this court has rules. If you're here to give opinions you're not qualified to give, I will strike your testimony. If you're here to play games, I will hold you in contempt. Is that understood? Evelyn nodded once. Understood. Judge Hale leaned forward slightly. Then answer me this. Why should anyone listen to you? Evelyn's voice stayed even. Because you already did, she said. The room quieted, not fully, but enough for the words to land. Judge Hale's brow creased. What does that mean? Evelyn turned her head toward him, respectful but direct. It means, she said, I sat on the Westmont Judicial Screening Panel. A ripple moved through the courtroom, like wind across tall grass. Judge Hale's eyes narrowed, and for the first time, he looked genuinely unsure. Evelyn continued, 8 years ago, when a vacancy opened on this bench and the governor asked for a short list, I was one of the people who interviewed candidates. I read your record. I watched your courtroom videos. I asked you why you wanted to serve. The courtroom went so quiet you could hear a pen tap stop midair. Evelyn's gaze didn't break, and I signed a recommendation letter that put your name at the top. Judge Hale's posture stiffened. A stunned breath came from the gallery. Victor Stanton's foot stopped bouncing. The prosecutor's face went carefully blank, like someone realizing the game had changed, but refusing to show fear. Evelyn let the silence stretch just long enough. I didn't come here uninvited, she said. I didn't wander in confused. I came because you, Judge Hale, are the kind of man who said you cared about justice, and I'm here to remind you what you promised. Judge Hale's jaw worked once. His eyes flicked to the clerk, then to the bailiff, then back to Evelyn, as if checking whether this was real. Diane Marshall seized the moment. Your Honor, she said quickly, Ms. Carter is here to authenticate records and testimony related to the state's audit ledger and the chain of custody issues we believe exist. Objection, Marcus Reed snapped. Relevance and foundation. Judge Hale held up a hand, still staring at Evelyn like she'd just opened a hidden door in his courtroom. Ms. Carter, he said, voice lower now, are you claiming the state's evidence is false? I'm claiming, Evelyn said, that it's incomplete. Marcus Reed stepped forward. Your Honor, the state has produced the ledger through Stanton Biotech's compliance department, certified. Evelyn didn't raise her voice, but she didn't back down. And I'm claiming, she said, that the part they didn't produce is the part that tells the truth. That's when everything changed. Judge Hale looked at Diane. Counsel approach. At the sidebar, voices dropped to a hush. The bailiff watched the gallery like a hawk. Daniel's hands trembled slightly on the table. Judge Hale's tone at the sidebar was clipped. If you're going to accuse the state of withholding evidence, you need more than suspicion. Do you have something concrete? Diane nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Carter brought a copy of a ledger printout with document stamps and export metadata that does not match what the state filed. Marcus Reed's eyes flashed. That's not possible. The ledger came directly from the company's internal system. It's certified. Evelyn, still seated, waited. She didn't look like someone enjoying the moment. She looked like someone doing something she'd promised herself she'd do. Judge Hale straightened. Bring it forward. Diane returned to her table, opened Evelyn's worn leather tote bag, and pulled out a thick, bound packet. It wasn't flashy. No dramatic seal. But the pages had something that mattered in court. Clean numbering, timestamps in the margins, and a printed certification page on top with a document control stamp. Diane held it up. Defense Exhibit A, Your Honor. Marcus Reed objected again, loudly this time. Objection. Authentication. This witness has not established she's qualified to interpret. Evelyn's voice cut through, steady. I'm not asking the court to trust my interpretation, she said. I'm asking the court to verify the data. Judge Hale stared at the packet. Miss Carter, where did you get that? Evelyn's answer was simple. From the same place the state claims theirs came from, she said. Stanton Biotech's internal audit export, dated October 16th, export time, 3:12 a.m. system ID, ABX Ledger 7. Export user, Stanton. The prosecutor froze. Victor Stanton's head lifted sharply. A small sound left the gallery, like someone accidentally inhaled at the wrong time. Judge Hale's eyes lifted slowly toward Stanton. Did you say? The judge asked. Export user, Stanton? Evelyn nodded. Yes, Your Honor. It's printed on page 1, and it's embedded in the export header on every page. Marcus Reed took a step forward, voice tight. Your Honor, that could be fabricated. Anyone can type a name onto a document. Evelyn's eyes didn't flicker. Not onto this, she said, because the export header repeats every 60 lines, and the hash code at the bottom matches the system-generated checksum format Stanton Biotech uses. It's not a font choice. It's a structure. Judge Hale turned to the clerk. Mark it for identification. And I want the state's ledger on the bench as well. The clerk hurried. Papers shuffled. The bailiff stood straighter. Daniel's eyes widened for the first time all morning. As the two ledgers were placed side by side, Judge Hale flipped pages with quick, irritated motions. At first glance, they looked similar. Then you noticed the differences. One detail didn't fit. On the state's ledger, the unauthorized wire transfers were listed as initiated at 10:47 p.m. October 14th, under Daniel Brooks's user ID. It was clean, neat, condemning. On Evelyn's ledger, the same transfers showed a pre-authorization event at 9:58 p.m., nearly an hour earlier, under a different ID. Not Daniel's. Admin VS. The header read. Judge Hale looked up sharply. What is Admin VS? Evelyn answered without hesitation. An administrative override account, used by compliance or executive-level users when they want to bypass standard approvals. Marcus Reed snapped. Objection. Speculation. Evelyn nodded. Then let's not speculate. Let's call a neutral expert to explain it. Diane turned slightly. Your Honor, the defense has already subpoenaed an independent forensic auditor. Marcus Reed's head whipped toward her. You did what? Diane's voice was firm. We did our job. Judge Hale's eyes narrowed. Who is your expert? Clara Grant, Diane said. Independent forensic analyst. Former internal audit contractor for multiple Westmont-based corporations. Not affiliated with either party. The name made Marcus Reed's face shift. He knew it. People in the system knew who was careful, who was credible, who didn't bend. Judge Hale looked at Marcus Reed. State. Marcus's voice came out controlled. The state objects to delaying proceedings for a sideshow. Evelyn's tone stayed calm. This isn't a delay, she said. It's a correction. Judge Hale exhaled slowly. Clerk, contact the witness. If she's available today, we proceed. If not, we recess and resume with her testimony. Marcus Reed opened his mouth. Judge Hale cut him off. I said what I said. Victor Stanton's eyes sharpened, and for the first time, the calm on his face looked forced. But then, while the clerk stepped out to make calls, Marcus Reed recovered his posture. He wasn't going to lose control without a fight. He approached the witness stand. Ms. Carter, he said, voice smooth again. You claim to care about justice, but you're not a lawyer, not an auditor, not an employee of Stanton Biotech. So let's talk about what you actually are. Evelyn waited. Marcus Reed smiled slightly. You're retired, what did you say? Public servant. Yes. And how many times have you testified in court? Evelyn's eyes softened just a fraction. Enough. Enough, Marcus repeated, as if tasting the word. But not under oath about corporate ledgers, correct? Evelyn didn't blink. Correct. Marcus nodded as if he'd won something. So your entire argument is based on a packet of paper you brought from home. Objection from Diane. Argumentative. Judge Hale allowed it but watched carefully. Marcus continued. Isn't it true, Miss Carter, that you are here because you feel sorry for this young man? Because you saw a sad kid and decided to play hero? Evelyn looked at Daniel for the first time. Daniel's eyes were glassy, desperate, but trying not to beg. Evelyn turned back to Marcus Reed. No, she said. I'm here because I know what a frame looks like. Marcus leaned in. That's a serious accusation. It should be, Evelyn said. Marcus's smile tightened. Let's get specific. You said the ledger shows an administrative override at 9:58 p.m. Are you aware that administrative accounts can be triggered automatically by system updates? Evelyn's reply was immediate. This wasn't triggered automatically. It has a manual keystroke signature. The prosecutor's eyes flashed. There you go again, pretending you can interpret. Evelyn held up one hand. Not dramatic, just certain. It's printed. She pointed to the margin. Event type, manual AUTH. Not system patch. And the session notes show a badge swipe, entry tied to the executive floor access gate at 9:52 p.m. The words badge swipe made heads turn again. Marcus Reed's voice sharpened. Where did you get badge access logs? Evelyn's answer was quiet. I requested them, she said. From who? Evelyn looked toward the judge. From a court order your clerk filed last week. Judge Hale's eye snapped to the clerk's desk. The clerk froze, then began shuffling papers. Judge Hale's face darkened. Marcus Reed stuttered for half a beat. Your Honor, the state was not notified. Judge Hale's voice cut like a gavel without the wood. If a court order was issued, the state was notified. Whether you read your notices is not my problem. A low murmur slid through the room. The laughter from earlier felt like a memory from another day. Evelyn's hand stayed steady on the witness stand. She wasn't a helpless old woman anymore. Not in that room. That's when everything changed. The clerk returned and whispered to Judge Hale. Judge Hale nodded once. Ms. Grant is here, the clerk announced. A woman walked in with a laptop case and a slim file folder, mid-30s, focused eyes, no wasted movement. Clara Grant didn't look impressed by the courtroom, and she didn't look afraid of it either. She was sworn in and seated. Marcus Reed tried to keep his expression neutral, but you could see the tension in his jaw. Diane approached. Ms. Grant, can you explain to the court what you do? Clara's voice was professional. I perform independent forensic audits. I analyze digital and paper records for integrity, metadata, system logs, access controls, transaction trails. I identify whether records were altered, withheld, or fabricated. Diane nodded. Were you provided with the state's audit ledger and the defense ledger? Yes. And did you compare them? Yes. Diane's next question landed like a match near gasoline. Are they identical? Clara didn't hesitate. No. A wave of whispers surged. The bailiff warned the gallery. Judge Hale's gavel tapped once. Diane leaned in. In what way are they different? Clara opened her folder. The state's ledger begins at entry number 004901 and continues to 005112. The defense ledger includes those entries, but also includes entry 004870 through 004900, which are missing from the state submission. Marcus Reed stood. Objection. Judge Hale raised a hand. Overruled. Let her finish. Clara continued. The missing entries are not random. They include pre-authorization events, administrative override sessions, and internal review notes flagged as executive visibility. Diane's voice stayed steady. Can you verify whether the defense ledger is authentic? Clara nodded. The defense ledger contains consistent export headers, a valid checksum structure, and internal stamp formatting that matches Stanton Biotech's known templates. I also cross-referenced timestamps with the building access logs subpoenaed from their security vendor. Marcus Reed's face tightened. And what did that show? Clara looked at Marcus Reed like he was just another variable. It showed that at 9:52 p.m. on October 14th, someone swiped Victor Stanton's badge at the executive elevator access point, she said. At 9:58 p.m., the override account initiated pre-authorization for wire transfers. At 10:47 p.m., Daniel Brooks's user ID appears, but his badge log shows he entered the building at 10:41 p.m. through the service entrance. Daniel's breath caught. The room held still. Clara continued, and the ledger notes showed Daniel's login session was created remotely, from an IP address assigned to the executive floor network, 7 minutes before he even entered the building. Diane let that hang in the air. Marcus Reed's voice sounded strained. So you're saying someone used his credentials? Clara nodded. That is what the data indicates. Victor Stanton shifted, slow and controlled, but it was a shift. Judge Hale looked toward Stanton, eyes sharper than before. Victor's face remained composed, but his fingers curled against his knee. One detail didn't fit. Marcus Reed wasn't done. He moved quickly, like a boxer who'd been hit but still had power. He walked to the clerk and handed over a flash drive and an evidence bag. Your Honor, he said, the state moves to introduce Exhibit 12. Diane's head turned. What is that? Marcus's voice was smooth. A recording. A phone recording of the defendant admitting he accessed the system and moved the funds. A stunned hush. Daniel jerked his head up. What? Diane stood fast. Objection. Foundation. Authentication. Chain of custody. Marcus Reed nodded as if he expected it. We obtained it legally from a cooperating witness. The recording is time-stamped October 15th, 1:12 a.m. Daniel's voice cracked. That's not me. Judge Hale's eyes narrowed. State who recorded it? Marcus hesitated just a fraction. A security supervisor at Stanton Biotech, he said. He will testify if needed. Diane's voice sharpened. Name him. Marcus said, Adrian Cross. Evelyn's eyes shifted slightly at that name. Judge Hale noticed. Ms. Carter, do you recognize that name? Evelyn's answer came careful. I've heard it. Marcus Reed pressed. Your Honor, we can play the recording. The court will hear the defendant's own voice. The bailiff retrieved a small speaker system. The clerk labeled the exhibit. The evidence bag was opened in view of the court. The drive was inserted. The audio crackled. A young male voice filled the room, low, nervous, saying words that made Daniel's blood drain from his face. I did it, the voice said. I went in. I moved the money. I thought nobody would notice. The gallery erupted with whispers. Someone scoffed like they knew it all along. Daniel shook his head hard. That's not me. That's not me. Diane grabbed his arm, grounding him. Judge Hale raised his gavel, face tense. Order. Marcus Reed's eyes cut toward Diane like now what? Diane didn't panic. She turned to Clara Grant. Ms. Grant, she said, voice steady. Can you evaluate that recording? Marcus snapped. She's an auditor, not an audio expert. Clara spoke before Diane could. Forensic analysis includes verifying digital integrity. I can examine metadata and file structure for signs of editing. Judge Hale nodded once. Proceed. Clara took the drive, handled it like it mattered. She connected her laptop, opened a forensic tool, and began reading file properties on the record. She spoke while she worked, because she knew juries and judges didn't trust silence. The file is labeled confession_final.wav, she said. That's not how raw phone audio typically exports. Phones create compressed formats, usually with system-generated names. Marcus Reed's jaw flexed. So what? Claire didn't look up. The creation date on this file is October 16th at 4:03 p.m. The claimed recording date is October 15th at 1:12 a.m. The room tightened. Clara continued. The file shows multiple encoding passes. That indicates it was rendered more than once. Also, the waveform contains discontinuities at exactly 9.5 seconds and 17.2 seconds, consistent with splicing. Marcus Reed's voice rose. Objection, speculation. Clara finally looked up. It's not speculation. It's measurable. Judge Hale's voice was cold. Are you saying the recording was edited? Clara nodded. Yes. And then she added the line that made Victor Stanton's calm finally crack. The background noise floor is inconsistent. In the first section, the ambient hum matches an office HVAC system. In the second section, it matches a server room fan frequency. The gallery went silent again, like everyone suddenly remembered where they were. Diane leaned in. So the confession is not reliable. Claire's voice didn't soften. It's a constructed file. Marcus Reed's face went pale for just a second before he forced it back. What they found next shocked everyone. Because that's when the bailiff opened the side door again. A man stepped in slowly, not escorted, not dragged, just walking like someone who'd made up his mind and couldn't turn around now. Adrian Cross. He looked exhausted, not disheveled, just worn, like sleep hadn't been kind to him. Marcus Reed's eyes widened. What are you doing here? Adrian didn't answer Marcus. He looked at the judge. Your Honor, he said, voice rough. I need to speak. Judge Hale's gaze pinned him. You're listed as a potential witness for the state. Adrian swallowed. I'm here on my own. Diane stood. Your Honor, we request a brief recess to address. Judge Hale held up a hand. No. If he's here, we hear him under oath. Adrian stepped to the stand. The clerk administered the oath. Adrian's hand shook slightly as he sat. Marcus Reed leaned forward, voice tight. Adrian, you're under subpoena by the state. If you... Judge Hale cut him off. Mr. Reed, sit down. Adrian exhaled, like someone letting go of a weight he'd carried too long. I was the security supervisor, he said. I provided the so-called confession file. Daniel's throat tightened. Adrian looked directly at Daniel. I'm sorry. The words hit the room like a slap. Diane stood slowly. Mr. Cross, why did you provide that file? Adrian's eyes flicked toward Victor Stanton. Just once, but it was enough. Because Mr. Stanton told me to, he said. Victor Stanton rose halfway from his seat. That's a lie. Judge Hale slammed the gavel once. Mr. Stanton, sit down. You are not testifying right now. Victor sat, but his face was no longer smooth. Anger flashed behind his eyes. Adrian continued, voice gaining steadiness. The company was under investigation internally for improper transfers. Not from Daniel, from higher up. When the money moved, the system flagged executive override, and compliance started asking questions. He swallowed. Mr. Stanton called me into his office. He said the board was watching. He said if this got out, we'd all lose our jobs, and the company would collapse, and it would be my fault for letting security slip. Adrian's voice dropped. Then he told me Daniel was the easiest solution. A kid with limited resources. A service entrance badge. No lawyer money. Daniel stared like he couldn't breathe. Adrian's eyes shined. He made me pull Daniel's login history. He made me retrieve old voice clips from security footage. Daniel talking to coworkers in the hallway. And he had someone in IT stitch them together. Diane's tone stayed controlled. Do you have proof of this instruction? Adrian nodded and reached into his jacket carefully. He held up a sealed envelope. The courtroom leaned in as one. Adrian said, It's a printed email archive, and I brought it sealed. Diane's head snapped up, but Evelyn's face stayed calm, like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. Judge Hale's eyes narrowed. That envelope, where did it come from? Adrian swallowed. I printed it from my company email before they disabled my access. It includes messages between me and Mr. Stanton, instructions, timelines, and a note from IT confirming they edited audio at executive request. Marcus Reed stood abruptly. Your Honor, I object. This is. Judge Hale looked like stone. Sit down. The bailiff approached, took the sealed envelope, and handed it to the clerk. The clerk labeled it, logged it, and placed it on the evidence table with visible care. Chain of custody in real time. Judge Hale turned to Clara Grant. Ms. Grant, can you verify this? Clara nodded. Yes. If we examine the email headers, message IDs, server routing logs, those are not easily fabricated. Judge Hale looked at Diane. Counsel, do you move to admit? Diane's voice was firm. Yes, Your Honor. Marcus Reed's voice shook with controlled frustration. Your Honor, the state requests a continuance. We need time to evaluate this. Judge Hale's eyes flashed. You will get time to evaluate, but you will not get time to bury. He looked at the clerk. Mark it, secure it, and contact the court's IT liaison. I want a forensic copy made today. Victor Stanton's face tightened, and then Judge Hale did something that made the whole room breathe differently. He looked at Daniel Brooks. Mr. Brooks, he said, voice quieter now. Stand. Daniel stood on shaky legs. Judge Hale's eyes held him. Given the testimony and evidence presented, I am ordering that bail be reduced immediately, and I am issuing a protective order against any contact from Stanton Biotech employees or representatives. Daniel's mouth opened, but no words came out. Judge Hale continued, louder now, for the record. I am also ordering referral to the Ridgeway Police Department Major Crimes Unit and notifying appropriate authorities regarding potential evidence, tampering, and obstruction. Victor Stanton shot to his feet again. Your Honor, this is outrageous. Judge Hale's gavel cracked again. One more outburst, and you will be removed. Victor froze, then sat, jaw clenched so hard it looked painful. But then, Evelyn Carter, the woman they'd laughed at, finally let out a slow breath, like she'd been holding it all morning. She didn't smile. She looked tired. Judge Hale turned to her, and for a moment, his voice changed. It wasn't proud anymore. It was human. Miss Carter, he said, you knew this was coming. Evelyn's eyes softened. I hoped. I didn't know. Judge Hale's gaze dropped to the ledgers, to the sealed envelope, to the forensic notes on Clara's laptop. And you walked into my courtroom, he said, and let me laugh at you. Evelyn nodded once. I've been laughed at before. The gallery held still. Evelyn's voice lowered, and the room leaned in, because now it wasn't evidence, it was the reason. When I was younger, she said, my brother was accused of stealing from a company that needed a scapegoat. He didn't have money. He didn't have influence. He had a bad haircut and a cheap suit and the wrong last name. She blinked, slow, like she could see it again. They showed the jury paperwork. They said it was clean. They said it was proof. And nobody wanted to look underneath it. He went to prison. He came out years later with his health ruined and his life gone. Evelyn's voice didn't break, but it shook at the edges. I promised him, she said, that if I ever saw a young person being crushed the same way, I would not stay quiet. She looked at Daniel, and I saw it again. One detail didn't fit. Judge Hale stared at her. The courtroom didn't breathe. Then Marcus Reed spoke, voice thin. Your Honor, he said, the state still maintains. Judge Hale held up a hand without looking at him. He turned to Clara Grant. Ms. Grant, in your professional opinion, does the audit ledger show intentional manipulation? Clara nodded. Yes. The missing entries are not missing by accident. The pattern suggests deliberate removal. Judge Hale's eyes turned slowly toward Victor Stanton. Mr. Stanton, he said, you are now subject to potential criminal investigation. You will not leave this building until law enforcement has been notified and you have been instructed by counsel. Victor's voice came out sharp. This is a witch hunt. Judge Hale's reply was ice cold. No, this is what happens when a court finally asks the second question. The clerk recorded. The bailiff moved closer to Stanton's row, not touching him, just making it clear the rules had shifted. Outside the courtroom doors, you could hear footsteps, more staff, more attention, like a machine starting up. And then the bigger hook revealed itself, not with drama, but with the kind of detail that makes a stomach drop. Clara spoke again, flipping one more page. There's something else, she said. Judge Hale turned. Go on. Clara tapped a line in the ledger. The override account admin VS isn't used only for this transfer. The defense ledger shows similar pre-authorization events on 3 other dates, smaller amounts, under different employee IDs. Marcus Reed's eyes widened slightly. Diane's voice was sharp. Other scapegoats. Clara nodded. Potentially. The pattern suggests a method. Judge Hale's face hardened. He wasn't looking at one case anymore. He was looking at a system. What they found next shocked everyone. Because the truth was suddenly bigger than Daniel Brooks. If those entries were real, and the data said they were, then Daniel wasn't the first kid to be blamed. He was just the one who got caught at the moment the wrong person decided to fight back. Judge Hale ordered a recess. Not to slow down, but to control the chaos. In the hallway outside Courtroom 3B, reporters began showing up fast, drawn by courthouse whispers. A camera crew appeared as if they'd been hiding in a van, waiting for a reason. Daniel stood near the wall, breathing like he'd been underwater, and finally surfaced. Diane Marshall spoke to him softly, telling him what bail reduction meant, what protective orders meant, what would happen next. Nora Blake pushed through the crowd and wrapped Daniel in a tight hug. 24, determined, eyes fierce. She looked like she'd been running on adrenaline since the arrest. "I told you," she whispered, voice shaking. "I told you we weren't letting them do this." Daniel's eyes filled. "I thought nobody would believe me." Nora looked past him to Evelyn Carter. "She did," Nora said. Evelyn stood apart, not soaking in attention, just watching like someone who knew attention could turn dangerous fast. Because it did. Victor Stanton walked out with his attorney, face controlled again, but his eyes locked on Evelyn for a brief moment. Not anger. Something colder. A silent message. "You just made yourself a problem." But then, inside Judge Hale's chambers later that day, the courthouse moved like a shaken hive. Major crimes detectives arrived. A federal task force liaison was notified because interstate wire transfers can trigger broader interest. An IT specialist prepared forensic imaging requests. Paperwork moved fast when the right people were scared. Judge Hale sat at his desk, and Evelyn Carter sat across from him. No courtroom now. No audience. No laughter. Just two people, and a reality neither could ignore. Judge Hale spoke first, quieter. "You could have exposed me," he said. "You could have stood up and said, 'I appointed you,' from the beginning." Evelyn's answer was simple. "That would have been about me. And this," Judge Hale said, "was about Daniel." Evelyn nodded. Judge Hale rubbed his forehead, a rare crack in his strict image. "I let them laugh." Evelyn didn't attack him. She didn't comfort him either. She just said, "You corrected it." Judge Hale stared at her. "How did you get that ledger?" Evelyn's eyes held steady. Nora found the first thread. Judge Hale's brow lifted. Evelyn explained. She worked at the building next to Stanton Biotech. She knew someone in the security vendor's office. She heard a rumor that badge logs were being cleaned before subpoenas. So she came to me. Judge Hale's voice turned skeptical again. "And you?" Evelyn's tone stayed level. "And I remember my promise. So I started requesting what a normal person doesn't think to request." She leaned forward slightly. "Not feelings. Not opinions. Records." Judge Hale listened. Evelyn continued. "I filed public records requests for vendor contracts. I asked which security company handled access controls. I looked for the audit software name in Stanton Biotech's procurement filings. Then I used that to identify how their export headers should look. Then I compared what the state filed to what the system format required." Judge Hale's eyes narrowed, impressed despite himself. Evelyn finished quietly. "I didn't need power to do that. I needed patience." One detail didn't fit. Judge Hale sat back. "Miss Carter, you're not retired, in the way most people mean." Evelyn's mouth twitched into the smallest hint of a smile. "I'm retired from a title," she said. "Not from noticing." Judge Hale exhaled, then looked at her with something like respect. "Daniel will likely be cleared," he said, "but this will get ugly. Mr. Stanton has connections. He will push back." Evelyn's voice was calm. "I expect him to." Judge Hale's eye sharpened. "And what about you? You're going to be in the news. People will come after your credibility. They'll call you dramatic. They'll call you confused. They'll call you everything they called you in that courtroom." Evelyn nodded as if she'd already accepted it. "I've been called worse," she said. Then she added, and I'm going to get official." Judge Hale frowned. "What do you mean?" Evelyn's gaze held his. "Certification. Training. I'm not letting the next Daniel depend on someone's goodwill. Next time, I want to walk in with credentials nobody can laugh at." Judge Hale sat in silence. Outside, the courthouse lights buzzed. Phones rang. A system shifted. That's when everything changed. The weeks that followed were loud. News vans outside Ridgway County Courthouse. Headlines about teen cleared in corporate theft case. Opinion pieces arguing about whether older citizens should be involved in court battles. Online strangers praising Evelyn, other strangers mocking her. Victor Stanton's attorneys fought aggressively, filing motions to suppress, motions to exclude, motions to delay. Marcus Reed, now under scrutiny himself, tried to claim he'd been misled by the company. But the evidence didn't care about excuses. The audit ledger, the badge swipes, the IP address logs, the email archive and sealed envelope. Clara Grant's forensic reports were clean, professional, and brutal. The confession recording was proven edited, with file creation timestamps and encoding signatures that couldn't be talked away. And Adrian Cross, under oath, signed a sworn affidavit detailing instructions and pressure from Victor Stanton, along with names of IT staff involved. Daniel Brooks's charges were dismissed, not with fanfare, with paperwork. The way real justice often arrives, quiet, official, undeniable. But the deeper network didn't vanish, because the more investigators pulled on the thread, the more they saw the pattern. Other employee IDs, other missing ledger entries, other young workers who'd taken plea deals because they were scared. A few cases reopened. A few people got calls they never thought they'd get. And Victor Stanton, once untouchable, found himself sitting in a conference room with attorneys who suddenly looked less confident. Aftermath brought pressure, too. Evelyn's mailbox filled with hate and praise. Strange cars slowed near her street. Anonymous emails told her to stop digging. A local radio host called her a hero one day and a meddler the next. Nora Blake stayed close, checking on her, helping her filter calls, reminding her to eat when she forgot. And Evelyn, quiet, underestimated Evelyn, did something that surprised even the people who liked her. She enrolled, not in a grand program with cameras, in certification courses, in compliance training, in forensic accounting fundamentals. She studied chain of custody protocols like they were sacred. She sat in classrooms full of people half her age and took notes with the same steady hand she'd held on the witness stand, because she meant what she said. She wasn't going to let the next courtroom laugh decide whether truth survived. But then, years passed. Ridgway, Westmont changed the way small towns always do. New businesses, new faces, old buildings still standing. Judge Raymond Hale aged into his role. He got less proud, more precise. He became known as the judge who didn't just listen to what was presented. He asked what was missing. Daniel Brooks didn't become famous, and that was the point. He got his life back. He went to school. He worked. He stayed out of headlines. Nora Blake built a career in records compliance, because once you've seen how records can be used as weapons, you don't forget. Clara Grant expanded her practice, becoming the name people called when they needed the truth without politics. Adrian Cross, after facing consequences and cooperating fully, became a cautionary story. Someone who did wrong, then chose to stop. And Evelyn Carter? Evelyn didn't disappear. She returned. On a bright Monday morning, another hearing day at Ridgway County Courthouse, the bailiff called. All rise. And Judge Hale entered, older now, calmer, still strict. The case on the docket wasn't about Daniel. It was about a corporate compliance scandal tied to multiple falsified audit submissions. The courtroom was packed again, but this time, people weren't there for a downfall story. They were there because they'd learned to fear what paperwork could hide. Judge Hale glanced at the witness list, then looked up. A familiar figure stood near the aisle, not in a cardigan this time, but in a simple suit, still modest, still practical, but with a badge clipped neatly to her folder. Not a police badge, a credential badge. Certified Forensic Compliance Analyst. Court-appointed special investigator, Evelyn Carter. She walked forward with the same measured steps, but now nobody laughed. Even before she spoke, the room felt different. Judge Hale watched her approach the stand, and for a moment, the air held that old memory, his laugh. The gallery's laughter, Daniel's burning face. Evelyn sat. The clerk administered the oath again. "I do," she said, voice steady. Judge Hale leaned forward, and his tone carried something the courtroom recognized as respect. "Miss Carter," he said, "please state your qualifications for the record." Evelyn opened her folder and spoke clearly. She listed her certifications, her training hours, her court appointments, her forensic protocols. No fluff, just facts. And when she finished, Judge Hale paused. His eyes met hers, and a small, almost private understanding passed between them. Two people who remembered the day laughter almost buried the truth. Judge Hale's voice softened just a fraction, and you could hear the full circle weight in it. "Miss Carter," he said, "the court appreciates your service." Evelyn nodded once, calm as ever. Then she glanced toward the back of the courtroom, where few strangers sat, the kind of people who used to laugh easily when an older woman walked in with a tote bag. Evelyn's voice stayed gentle, but it landed like a verdict. "Funny," she said, "how quiet a courtroom gets once the person you laughed at is the one holding the proof." And this time, nobody laughed at the old woman in the courtroom, because everyone knew she was the one who had appointed the truth to speak.